What up, what up? Hope everybody is having a fantastic Saturday night? Yeah, Saturday night. We are going to kind of tear through what the general consensus is, kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly from what people are saying about the last live stream update we got. And what the fuck is this music? What the fuck was that music? See if we can find something a little bit better here.
What do you want?
How's everybody doing tonight? Just doing. What up, cheese? Hey, cheese, could you do me a favor real quick, man? Could you go over to the YouTubes? And if you'd like, I can link it for you in chat here. I'm doing a naughty thing. Can you go click that? And if you're not subbed, sub over there. And even if whether you are or you are not, if you could say something in chat over there. Kind of testing some stuff out here a little bit. But once I see what's up with that, I will we'll get to breaking this down, seeing what's what. You there, Cheese? Oh, never mind. I figured it out. We're good. Did you have to make a channel or an account? I mean, I guess it's technically the same thing, but don't you already have an account? And they both show up on screen. Yep. Awesome. Perfect. It's technically a no-no, but I am contemplating a transition over to YouTube. Not a huge fan of the stuff that, not that it overly affects me. Like, I'm not here for the fucking subs and whatnot. Like, I appreciate it, but I do this because I enjoy it. It was my Google account that made me make a channel. Good though, because I didn't want my real name to show up on YouTube. That's fair. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm thinking of switching over because I don't want you guys to be forced to support something that I wouldn't want to support myself. Um, or by virtue of like supporting me with subscriptions and cheers and stuff like that. Like that's money into Twitch's pocket. And me personally, I don't like the approach that they're taking from the viewer side with all of the ad bullshit, and the streamer side with taking even more of a cut potentially. I've kind of reached a point where instead of crying about it on Twitter, what I can do is I can just switch. Now, I'm not overly a huge fan of YouTube stuff either, but there's very limited space to kind of be a streamer. So, unfortunately, it's picking your poison, and I'd really hoped that Twitch wouldn't get so bad that the poison is worse over here. But here we are. So, gonna do this for a little bit, and so just know that there's probably gonna be a transition over to YouTube at some point. I'm playing around with the idea. It's gone from like, oh hey, what about this, to okay, maybe I need to start moving the channel in this direction a little bit. So, on that note, now that we got chats and stuff figured out, they don't stop and do both. Yeah, but again, from my like, again, what it comes down to, why I would fully transition and not just do both, because they will stop it eventually, more than likely. Like, it'll take them a while to find me, right? I'm a fucking baby streamer. But I don't want you guys to be supporting. By virtue of supporting me, you are supporting something that I personally wouldn't want to support. So, kind of like if I were to ever have like any sponsors of the channel, I would never sponsor anything that I didn't actually like or believe in or anything like that. And so it's just kind of a baseline thing for me. I don't want you guys to, whether you guys care or not, I care. Yo, what up, Baba? What up, B-Man? What up, what up? Yeah, we're going over, Cheese was just helping me get the YouTube side stuff figured out real quick, but we are just gonna kind of go through the community response. We'll probably watch the video, and not to its entirety, but I'll reference back to the video a couple of times, and kind of pull out some stuff, because there was one quote in the, or one thing that was said in the entire video that to me was the biggest thing that was said, and I kind of want to break that down a little bit. Oh, look, you responded to me on the forums. Yeah, the fucking animal husbandry system is gonna make it so snorses are running rampant, and that is a negative of the animal husbandry system. That is a negative. So real quick, so a little bit after the day after yesterday, the live stream happened, the monthly update happened. Vacnar put a response out. Step up your forum game. But Vacnar put out a little, just a comment here, just kind of reminding everybody what it is that we saw, and I just want to go through that real quick. I know most of us in here get it, but just for the sake of clarity, for anybody who might be lurking, new, whatever. So Vacnar put out, which is one of the community moderators at Intrepid, before you submit feedback in our basic weapon attack combo thread, we'd like to clarify some information regarding the basic weapon attack demo. Ashes of Creation utilizes a hybrid combat system. there it is, set in stone. I mean, that's what I derived from the live stream because it was said in the live stream by the engineers. But this is him coming out and clarifying, probably because community feedback was like, man, I don't like action combat. I don't like all of this stuff. Hey, appreciate the sub, Bubba. So they probably felt that they needed to put this out. This means it is not an action combat only game. Again, all the people crying about, it's action combat. We want tab target. It's hybrid. Just wait. We only saw a glimpse. We only saw a glimpse of it. What was shown on stream was not a full demo of combat. It was a demonstration of the basic melee attacks with a couple of melee weapons. A little bit more than just the basic attack. Although, based on what they had shown us, I think their statement of basic melee attacks was more like my thought. I was thinking like just the basic attack, right? But they were showing kind of they had shown a total. If you include block, they showed whirlwind, block, the hammer ability, and then the basic attack itself. So I think they were referencing just kind of basic weapon attacks, not the basic weapon attack. Does that make sense? And the dash, thank you. Yep, the dash as well. Ashes of Creation will feature abilities that are both tab target and action combat. Here's a clip of Steven explaining our hybrid combat system to provide visual aid. A lot of us have seen that already. Which you thought looked really fluid. It did look very fluid. It looked good. Help provide some clarity. Thank you again for supporting Ashes of Creation and following along our development journey. We're looking forward to your feedback. So basically just saying like, chill out guys. It's not just action combat. And I don't want to harp too much on the people who like saw the video and were like, oh my God, it's action combat. I think that's a bad take because that's not the case. And like I said, in the live stream, they said hybrid. But without the full breadth of the combat system, the combat, and especially without UI, it's very hard to tell. UI is actually a really big indicator when it comes to tab target, and they did show off some tab targeting during the live stream. It's just very hard to tell unless you know what it is that you're looking for. So moving on from that, we have just gonna kind of go down the thread here a little bit. So Backnar put this out, basically just asking for response. So we're gonna go through this and kind of just see what people are saying. To help guide the conversation, here are a few thought starters. What aspects of basic melee weapon attacks are important to you? Do you feel anything is missing from the basic melee weapon attacks we've shared so far? Are there types of basic melee weapon attacks in other games that you feel are done well? If so, in what ways? The lack of bows, agreed. I'm actually really looking forward to the range because action combat with melee is much easier to make look good, whereas ranged action combat is much harder to get it to feel right because it's a lot more skill shot going on, right? So I'll be very interested to see the ranged update side of the action combat. Wake up, invade their territory, and chase you down until victory. Stop you if you attack. It's yeah, welcome in, Toxic Ape 3000. Appreciate you coming in. I like that, and we're gonna have some creatures in the overworld, right? Like there's gonna be the foxes running around, the bears running around, and whatnot. But it's really cool that some of the areas are gonna be a little bit more hidden. And as we discover the map and we kind of know what we're looking for, like we're gonna know where these creatures exist. We're gonna know what we're looking for as time goes on. But from a discovery aspect, it's gonna be really cool to be like walking around and maybe be like, oh, I'm safe to go over here. I'm gonna go harvest. I'm gonna go yeah, I'm gonna go gather, I'm gonna go harvest over here, and then all of a sudden just shit starts popping up out of the grass. Like it's gonna be crazy. Um, but it is something that we'll figure out. But it'll be cool to have that kind of first time experience going into a new zone, figuring out, what those monster spawns look like. So it'll be really cool. Is there anything in particular you're excited or concerned about regarding what was shown with the basic melee weapon attacks? So we'll kind of go through here and see what people are saying. So the Dark Sorcerer looks like was the first one to respond to this and said they love the fast action paced combat. I agree. Not rooted while performing attacks. I mean, that was a major point of feedback that they received in Alpha 1 to the point where they actually changed it towards the end of Alpha 1. I hope the game will evolve into PvE dangerous situations from time to time. I agree. I think a good PvX game, you're constantly, you're concerned about other players in the world, but you should be concerned about the world itself, right? And I think where a lot of games go wrong is if they claim to be PvX. If a game claims to be PvX, usually you see them lean more towards the PvP side or the PvE side. And so, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it would be nice to see a nice balance to it. And I think with what we're seeing so far, there is the potential for a good balance to be there, but we have to see how it all plays out for sure. Love the implementation of adjusting damage numbers. That's awesome. Especially not having to have a third party add-on to do that, like in WoW where you download what was the name of that UI overhaul? LVUI. So not having to download something like that and just being in game. I mean, that's a big point of feedback that people have been saying in WoW is why do we have to have all of these add-ons? Why can't you just put this stuff in game? And so Blizzard has crutched on add-ons for a very long time for their game. And so it's nice to see that Intrepid is going the direction of, no. We want to handle this to the point where we actually don't want to allow add-ons. Our API is going to be private. It's not going to completely prevent add-ons because there are still screen capture add-ons. But that will absolutely limit the number of add-ons that are in a game. It's not going to be as egregious as it is in WoW, right? Improvement ideas. When blocking, I would like to see that your character is actually taking a hit in character's body movement. Right now, it's just sound. Okay, so like some kind of stagger or something like that. I think that could be okay. Or missing footsteps. That would help the character feel more grounded. I think you have to be careful there because you don't want too much sound going off. You want the important sounds going off. So I would say that maybe this line right here might not be necessary. I think maybe if you're walking through water, like through a puddle, or if you are walking in the snow, maybe there's a little bit of a crunch. But I think that needs to be situational because that on top of all of the other combat sounds going on might be a little bit much on the intake side for the player. They're taking the opposite Blizzard approach. Blizzard, fuck it, make your own. AoC, I'm gonna build you everything you want for UI. Yep. And the reality is there are pros and cons to both, right? Because Intrepid isn't going to be able to get absolutely everything in that people want. It's going to be impossible. So that is a benefit of having that that open source API that Blizzard has, is that people can create exactly what it is that they want, or they can at least find somebody. Like there are enough people creating add-ons for WoW that you can find something for you, right? But at the very least, having some depth to your UI customization at a baseline, then it doesn't then require. It feels bad when it's required to download add-ons, and it very much so in Blizzard and WoW, it feels required, especially if you're rating at a high tier, it feels required to download add-ons. So if they can remove that requirement step, that's what's going to be key. The spin with daggers felt out of place. Was this supposed to be used with a hammer or a greatsword? I've actually seen this a couple of times. I was having a conversation in response to the burning discussion episode that they put out on their YouTube. That would feel more appropriate due to swing. Looked like he was swinging something heavy and not light daggers. Same with that big hammer animation. Felt odd to use that dagger, but understand this was just a little tease on skills and not yet final. I mean, after releasing Ashes, they're still going to update new ideas and stuff from time to time. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if people, say, if there's a resounding like, hey, we want this in UI customization, I wouldn't be surprised to see that get put in. I mean, abilities are class-based. Yep. He could use those abilities with a wand equipped. Right. So, and that was basically my response to it, is that abilities are going to be determined by the class kit rather than the weapon that you are wielding. The weapon that you're wielding is just going to give essentially passive skills rather than like do this attack, your next attack is now buffed type stuff. We need to see how all of that plays out. But I will say that is a little bit concerning because I feel like it would be very weird to have a wand and a tome and then start spinning around in a whirlwind. The hammer makes sense because you're summoning the hammer, right? Like that one doesn't bother me as much. Any weapon can have that hammer. But that spinning ability would be really weird with ranged abilities. I mean, a staff, it can make sense. A bow, it's a stretch, but I could see them making that work. But like a wand, no, that would be extremely weird for a wand. Like I'm holding a wand and a tome and now I just start spinning around like a crazy person, like, and it looks like I have a sword. And so I am concerned from that aspect if it's going to feel good, being a fighter. I mean, first of all, let's be real, guys. If you're a fighter and you're running around with a wand and a tome, you've already dropped to the bottom of the reliability list in my book, but I'm an elitist asshole. So I get people have, the way that they want to play out the game and all of this different stuff, but it's still an MMORPG. Like people constantly want to say, well, but like in D&D, you can do all of this crazy stuff. That's great. That's a pen and paper game. That's not an MMORPG. It's okay to pull from D&D, so I am concerned about how that's going to play out. Gruntak says, perhaps they can add in the skill only works with certain weapons. So to that point, I feel as though that would go directly against what Steven is going for, or what he has said that they are going for. I think that would make the most sense. Like if you don't have a staff, a spear, or some kind of sword, you can't use that spinning ability. I think that would make sense, but I think that contradicts what he has said about wanting people to use the weapons that they want to use regardless and wanting the player to have that agency there. So if he's wanting to stick to that, I feel like implementing something like that directly contradicts that. So again, we kind of just need to see how that plays out, and I'm really trying to reserve judgment on that aspect in particular because I'm really hoping it's something they can show me something that I haven't seen before that is done very well. Baba says, particularly care because I don't plan to mismatch my weapons with my class. And that's where I'm at with it, right? Like, if somebody wants to run around with a wand and a tome and they're a fighter, like, yeah, according to what we know so far, you can do that. Might not be inviting you to my group if we're doing some hard content, but you can live out your fantasy, the way that you want to. I'm a Spellblade. I use a sword and tome. Thank you. You will lose your fighter card if you run around with a wand and tome. Yeah, basically. That's kind of my thought. Again, people can do what they want, but I'm also free to choose who the fuck I allow in my group if we're doing difficult content. Alpha 2 feedback just doesn't make sense for class skill to depend on. Just doesn't make sense for class skill To spend. Oh yeah, to spend with certain weapons. Yeah, I agree. In my opinion, the impact of weapons hitting the target should be more realistic. Um, so kind of define that for me. Kind of walk through that with me. Are you talking about like you would like to see a little bit more of a like your sword hits the target and there's a little bit more of a lag going through the target? So it's almost like you're hitting something solid rather than the sword just going through. Um, I guess yeah, like kind of what is your thought there? Not necessarily the solution, but just something that you would kind of like to see, something that might trigger that in your brain um, to make that feel more the way that you want it to. As someone who plays sorcerer in every game, I would love to see magic weapon combat. Okay, that's just talking about this gave me a lot of confidence for the project. For me, Intrepid now has been able to utilize the entirety of the game dev toolset involved this project on a very high level. PvE weapon combat looked already refined. I mean, I would disagree with this statement right here. I think what we saw in Alpha 1 definitely needed a lot of work. And I think the fact of what we saw in the most recent update looked so good, even in comparison to just a year ago. I don't know if you guys have seen that side-by-side video, but it actually looks like two different games, both with the transition from UE4 to UE5 and then the combat changes. It actually looks like two different games. Similar games, but two different games. And that just lends to the impact of combat and how important it is. Seemed like a good scale. I would agree with this. I think great swords can go a little bit heavier. Just a touch heavier. I think we can go a touch heavier with if greatsword is the heavy side, like is the heaviest side. I think we can go a little bit heavier, but overall I do agree, and I'm glad that they showcased the high end and the low end. I think that was a good idea. From what I've seen, it looks exactly like what I'm looking for. In response to the comment, okay, they're just responding there. All right, see what you guys are saying here. Exactly what I said. Okay. Yeah, no, and I think that that's something that and like I said, we'll watch the video a little bit later and kind of break down what it is that we're seeing, but I think there is a little bit of that already there. They might just need to implement a little bit more. But I do think it's a balancing act, right? Because I think it's something that the more root motion you have, the more impact you can visually see/feel, that your brain can feel through your other senses besides touch, primarily sight and sound. So without it being full root, I think there will always be a little bit more of a lack. Like that's that give and take, right? Root motion lends to more weightedness, whereas split body or freeform gives you more fluidity and control over your character, but you lose some of the impact. And so there is a little bit of a give and take there. But I do agree they could go a little bit heavier with stuff, whether that's through, if you're using a great sword, maybe it's rooting just a fraction of a second longer. There's a little bit of a lag, like, because it kind of makes sense. You have a giant ass great sword, you swipe down on something, and it sticks, right? You're forcing through it. Whereas with a dagger, you're kind of doing surface cuts and whatnot, so you don't necessarily need that to exist with the daggers. So I do think that that's something that maybe they just kind of tweak it there, right? Like I was saying, I think they need to have it a little bit heavier on the heavy side, not too much so, but a little bit heavier, and maybe that's one of the things that they could look at playing with. People misunderstood the thing about mage using sword or dual sword. It's like, unless for open world PvE, PvP, but in Olympiad 3v3 matches, only buff characters just take dual swords and auto attack, swap weapons, stealing mana. Okay, so basically saying that just because you have certain weapons on, you might, and that kind of goes to what, well, I think he was saying what you were possibly suggesting, Gruntek. Toxic Ape, are you saying that, like, if I'm a mage but I have a sword equipped, I might not be able to use some of my spell abilities, but I still take that sword when I'm a mage? That way, when I am regaining my mana, I can at least go in and kind of do some like basic attacks and whatnot with my sword while I'm waiting for that mana to regenerate. If that's what you're saying, that's how I understand it. But if that's not what you're saying, go ahead and clarify that for us. Combat and aesthetics looked wonderful. The motion, fluidity. I know there's going to be iterations, but I would disagree with the fluidity side. I think it definitely could feel more fluid. You have character 1v1 Olympiad. Your buffer only buffs, no damage abilities, so just steals mana, put on dual spore, beat him with auto attacks, and put mage weapon to heal yourself or steal enemy mana. Okay. So I think I'm understanding. I would personally, if that is a playstyle that existed within Ashes, that's not something I would prefer to do. One of the things with mana consumption classes that I strongly dislike is when I'm standing there with my thumb up my ass, not doing anything. I think that is a very, very old iteration of combat from like literally 10 years ago. Like 10 years ago plus. Like you look at classic WoW, right? Classic WoW combat, except for a couple of classes, is so slow. I know there's classic Andes out there. People live and die by vanilla WoW. I get it. You guys love it. You're chasing your nostalgia hit. That's great. It's a fun game for you. I played the combat for that. I wanted to blow my fucking brains out. It was the most boring combat I have ever experienced in any game ever. And I didn't play classic WoW back in the day. So I was coming into it after all of the iterations throughout the entire genre of the combat becoming better and going back. And I felt like I was going in a time machine and playing a very, very old game, which I was, but it does not feel great to sit there waiting for your secondary resource to regenerate. Allow me to actively regenerate my secondary resource. That's me. That's me. So I am a always be clicking, ABC, always be clicking. No, I'm not a clicker. You know, I'm always use your keybind, ABK, always be key binding. But I want to basically always be doing something if I am in combat with something. At no point do I want to sit there with my thumb up my ass waiting for an ability to come off cooldown or waiting for a resource to generate back up just because of time. Allow me to actively regenerate that resource with another ability. And that's why I typically stay away from caster classes, because you have a lot of that in casting classes. A mage with a sword will have weapon skill tree of that sword. It will probably not be as efficient as a tank or warrior, but they would be able to use the sword with different sword skills if spec'd that way. What's Olympiad? You've referenced it a couple of times. I'm not sure what that is. Unless you're I'm not. I don't know what that is. I'm not sure what you're referencing there. Let's see here. Let's go, Summoner. Summoner, go. I'm going to eat a sandwich, BRB, JK. I don't want this. Oh, okay, okay. I thought you were referencing like a whole nother like MMO. Bites for reward weekly, becoming the hero for your own class. Right, okay. My misunderstanding. Improvement over A1. Yeah, love it. Amazing. I want to find. So Clint Hardwood, actually, like that name. The biggest problem I have seen is that neither the enemy nor the player gets staggered by large attacks. Disagree, because there was a enemy attack that actually forced the player back. Now they need to work on what is happening, because as it currently is, the player character would just float back, but there was, I guess, not stagger, but there was something forcing you to get like hit, and something out of your control happening to your character. It makes the heavy attacks feel light and floaty. So that is something that I am very concerned about when it comes to combat, is when it feels floaty, because A1 combat, when it was more of the freeform, less root, more freeform, split body, it felt very floaty. I personally did not get that impression from this. I think that I think that there can be more impact, but I think that there was a good amount of impact, especially improvement over A1. Also, the overhead swing feels too quick. I think it should be slower. Stagger the opponent and root the attack for longer. Okay, so I think that this person is, and I'm assuming here, I think that this person is mostly looking at this from a action combat standpoint, and that's it. And I think in a hybrid system, you're not going to get the full-on impact that you typically get in an action combat ability, because you don't need that in a tap target. Impact is done differently in tap target, and so with it being a hybrid system, again, we're going to see those two worlds coming together, and there's going to be give and take on both sides of that. From the bigger elemental, yeah, they did the push. Yeah, when Stephen got hit by it, it pushed him back. Yep. Regarding damage number UI customization options, it would be nice in addition to customization of these options to go in depth, where we can customize the color based on the damage type. So I don't know if we're going to be able to customize the color based on the damage type, but we will be able to add icons to indicate what type of damage is being done. But I would be fine if people, I mean, let people customize their stuff any way that they want to. I think that that's absolutely fine. Let them go crazy with it. No name for the win. Animations look neat. It's like the guy in the corner of the room, like, I like it. The weapon may clip through mobs, but the player character should never. Yeah, so I think there's some really good feedback in this simple statement. I think they need to make sure that the clipping is taken care of. And I see what they're saying by having them, a little bit further away. Like, don't let the mobs get so close. I think that would be good, because you never want to feel like crowded, right? Unless you're intentionally feeling crowded. Like, if you pull an entire zone to you, then yeah, you should feel crowded. But there were only, maybe 5 or 6 monsters at any given time, and sometimes I felt a little bit encroached on your character. I hope monsters will have many of these types of attacks. Jumps in air, lands on floor, people around get stunned or drop down for 5 seconds, knocked out, etc. Throws stuff into you, or drags his enemies into themselves with whips. Yeah, no, I think all of that is stuff that would absolutely be good in the game. I'm not a fan of it's probably just because I hate CC in general. Like, it never feels good to be CC'd, right? It feels good applying a CC, but it never feels good to be CC'd. So I know by saying this, it's from only one side of the conversation, but I don't like not having control over my character. And I feel like it's more acceptable if another player is taking away the control of my character, but if an NPC's, like if a mob is taking away the control of my character, for me, it just feels worse. It doesn't make sense. And I know I'm being biased by just taking that one side of it because, again, it feels good applying CC. So torture people, yeah. Cleave feature with wide swings. So yeah, that's something Shadow Phase here on the forums pointing out that they liked the cleave feature. That's one of the things that I love about action combat is you're hitting kind of everything in front of you, right? Like having all of that stuff in front of you being hit feels really good. Like to me, AoE is amazing. I played Demon Hunter in World of Warcraft, and going through dungeons with an AoE build is some of the greatest gameplay to me ever. Like when it comes to like kind of impact of what you're doing. Doing a lot of AoE stuff, like it feels great. AoE feels great. You know, pull the entire mob, the entire zone to me, and I pop all my abilities, and everything around me just starts falling over. Like that feels awesome. Feel like, you know, just feel badass in that situation. I know some people are concerned about the impact of AoE in Ashes of Creation, and I'm not saying that that needs to be in there. I'm just saying that from my experience with other games, I've liked that aspect in other games. It's not something that I feel needs to be there. It's just for me personally, I really like that impact. What else does Shadow Phase say here? I think the spin with the dagger looks weird, being the same as the two-handed sword. Okay, that's kind of going back to what somebody else was saying earlier. If it's a skill like the hammer, then maybe summon a weapon fitting the animation. You know what? Actually, I think that would solve a lot of it. Instead of just a whirlwind happening and it's whatever weapon you're holding, summon a sword. Have a sword be summoned the same way that the hammer is being summoned. I think that would actually curb a lot of that. I think that's really good feedback there. The Golem Landslide's attack or whatever could do with some more telegraphs, like pulling up rocks or something from the ground. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to go as far, and I don't think that they're saying this, just it triggered in my mind. I don't want to go as far as like Wildstar, where everything is like a ground telegraph, right? Because then that just gets cluttered and crazy, and it kind of breaks away from the immersion of what you're doing. So as long as it's a animation telegraph and not like a ground target telegraph, I think that's okay. Third dimension of the sword needs to be reworked. It's a slow wind up, then a little too fast on the hit, then it just appears on the ground. This is minor. I'm not sure it will be addressed. Brujo. I'll keep an eye on that because I don't think that was something that I noticed. But when we go back and watch the video, I'll keep an eye on that. I like. So Visox says I like the sword. It looks like a real sword. Yeah. One of the things that I noticed about the sword is to me it was a happy medium between crazy, ridiculously long, giant, huge, like anime sword and a great sword that doesn't like that isn't big enough. And so I felt like it was, you kind of visually see the weight of the giant ass sword you're holding, but it's not this 500-foot long fucking anime sword. I hate those things. I hate them. My halberd will be longer, as it should be, but it should also be fairly tiny until you get to the blade on the end, and then that thing can be beefy. And I don't know about you guys, Gruntag, do you think that halberd should be maybe even considered heavier, like in terms of weightedness and kind of impact of what you're doing? Should it be considered heavier than the greatsword? Because I feel like it would be easier to swing a greatsword effectively than to swing a halberd effectively, because it's so long. Like it takes so much longer to bring it around. Should be a heavy weapon, but greatsword is also heavy. Yeah. Maybe that's something. Maybe they can differentiate it with the animation, right? Long, but not as heavy as a greatsword, to be honest. Okay, that's fair. The halberd should heavy with swing and fast with stabs. Yeah, no, very, very good point, DG. Welcome in. Very good point. I think that that's something that would be um, should be noticeable, right? You know, same thing with a spear. You know, you can sit there, you can stab in a bunch of times, but then if you're doing some kind of swing with it, it takes a little bit longer to bring it around. All right, Visok said the sword, it looks like a real sword. The dagger animation, the ground impact decals, the dagger glints swishes, the floatiness. Okay, that's the second time the floatiness has been mentioned. Just this music volume here, real quick. The sword glint. Okay, get rid of the yellow sword glint. So at first, we had talked about this a little bit on the Golden Feather podcast yesterday. At first, I was okay with what we were seeing there, with that yellow sword effect that was happening when you would swing. But then somebody brought up saying, well, what if you're in a 200 versus, you know, or 250 versus 250 siege battle and you just see yellow shit flying all over the place? That's a problem. Halberd only has a small portion of it, as the blade being the heavier part. Greatsword is full heavy boy metal. True. I don't like this guy's opinion. Having your sword bounce off of the mob because made of rocks would look stupid and feel awful. I agree. I'm okay with there being a little bit of, and I'm going to use the word lag. I'm obviously not talking about game lag, but animation lag in a good way, where it kind of feels like you're kind of having to go through it, but I don't think you can go too heavy with that. I think you can put a little bit there, but you don't want to go too heavy with it. It's still a game. It's fantasy. Like, you know, it doesn't need to be so realistic that you hear a tink when you hit a stone golem, or you hear a when you fucking, you know, stab a fucking fox. Like, it needs to flow regardless, because it's not going to feel great to be swinging your giant sword and it's just go dunk and you just full stop right there. Like that would not feel good. So from that standpoint, I would agree. Hitting a rock with a piece of metal, right? Oh, I didn't get that far yet. It needs to hit and bound backwards. Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry, Visox. Hard disagree on that. Hard disagree. Yeah, again, again, a lot of the feedback that we've been reading has been coming, I think, from a very clear action combat side. What I would really be interested to hear is, and now granted, I don't have a ton of action combat experience, so maybe I feel this demographic, but I want to see what people are saying. The people who are okay with action but prefer tab, I want to see what they're saying. Okay, there is a tab target mode, so we're just gonna skip over that. Good with this. I didn't expect, because I did not expect the game to be willing to go faster than even BDO. Therefore, because I was working from the incorrect assumption that there was no way Intrepid would have made the game faster than BDO and Neverwinter, given the other feedback received, but it is clear that you really want to push the genre beyond anything we have seen. Any other feedback I give would be a similar speculation. As a dagger user generally, I can absolutely work with the fast footwork Blade Storm. I just saw, especially when the hitbox is shifting, can absolutely be sure. Able to see, you are going to make, okay. So overall positive there. Can't say, oh yeah. Well, and honestly, like, I don't just like writing people off, but this right here, can we have tab target mode? That it exists. So sorry, you're not coming from a place of knowing what the fuck you're talking about. So we're gonna move on. Not trying to be a dick, just not gonna waste my time with people who haven't looked into what it is. So, and was literally said in the live stream. The engineers literally referenced the hybrid combat. Talking about ability tool kick. This absolutely feels like the quality I was hoping for going Alpha 2. Huge step up from Alpha 1. Although there's a lot that remains to be seen regarding range. Okay, kind of general. Good job, Intrepid there. Yep, I agree here. There's definitely some work that needs to be done, but I fully expect that work to be done. I gladly take this combat in its current state over 90% of MMOs out there. And I think that that's something that people don't realize is that there are live games that have worse combat than even the Alpha 1 iteration of combat. Like, I understand wanting to get the combat like dead perfect, fucking amazing, but in reality, it just needs to not be shit. Horrible combat will pull people away from the game. Average combat, people will still play. And amazing combat, people will still play, right? So the bar that you have to hit is you just need to not be shit. It needs to not be dog water when it comes to combat. So as long as it's okay or amazing, you're good to go. Now, if it's more on the okay side rather than the amazing side, then you best make sure that your other systems are amazing, right? Like, it's a balancing act, but you don't really need combat. And so when people get feedback, sometimes it's like, I'm not saying that Intrepid has an excuse to make okay combat when they can make amazing combat, but the bar isn't set very high for combat, realistically. Watch 60 seconds of live stream. This question was tab target. Was this heavy or medium weapon showcase? So they had shown the greatsword to show the heavy end of the spectrum, and then they showed the daggers to show the light end of the spectrum. So it was more about the melee basic attacks than it was about the exact weapon type, but they chose those two weapon classes to showcase the different weightedness that they are going for and kind of the spectrum that they're looking at when it comes to weight. Really want to see the bow crossbow next, maybe next month, dev stream, fingers crossed. I think we see, I mean, I took a bunch of notes and I because he said different things in the video as opposed to on the live stream, and I kind of compiled it all together, and it looks like we have a little bit of a clear path on what it is that we're going to be seeing, which, by the way, was like the number one thing I was asking going into this developer update. I said it on Two Guys in a Bard. I said it on last week on Golden Feather, 2 Fridays ago. Give us what it is that you're going to be showcasing at different points. Now, they could have been more detailed with it and say, this is what we're showing next month, this is what, or at least the order in which they're going to show it. But I am bare minimum. They gave me the bare minimum that I personally was wanting, and they kind of talked about the different things that they would be showcasing. So I think that was great. That way we can kind of curb our expectation on what it is we're going to be seeing on a month-to-month basis. Honestly, from what we saw, I highly agree with his comment from Alpha 1 to now. I think the direction it seems to be going is fucking awesome. 100%. Hoping for Bow 2. Grub Tech, pretty sure they said that's what is next. They say a lot of things. While BDO looks and feels great, it's overly flashy. So, stopping right there, that's VFX. That's giant anime swords, that's VFX. I think you can have fast combat like BDO and just tune down those other things and it not seem as crazy as BDO. But I agree with that statement. Visually, BDO combat seems fucking insane. Mechanically, it's really good. It's overly flashy, and easy combat can also put me off. I'd much rather play a boring tab targeting game than something like BDO. Okay, that's just preference there. Just please don't make it like ESO with the clunky weaving, AA canceling mess. I didn't play too much ESO, but I remember it feeling very, very weighted. But I've also heard people say good things about ESO combat. So, or wait, no. I think it was about ESO's talents and ability, like trees, for combat, not necessarily combat itself. So maybe not. Between one-handed weapon plus shield, dual wielding one, I would assume so. I mean, we don't have confirmation, but I would assume that there's going to be a difference if you're sword and board versus a one-handed sword and nothing in your offhand. Like, I think that would make sense, but maybe not. Maybe it's just purely based on the class of weapon that you're using, light, medium, heavy. All right, beer brats here. Looks like they gave a pretty decent breakdown here. What they liked: directional attacks were smooth looking, ground decals were a nice detail, sounds were great, agreed. Damage and crit numbers and custom. I'm just gonna say customization, customization. Or one of my favorite. I don't know why that word was hurting my brain right there, but customization, or one of my favorite bits of the demo. Suggestions: I wish there were more visual indications that you were being hit or that a unit was being hit. Okay, so again, somebody else is saying that they would like to have a little bit more impact on the actual hit side of the combat. Yo, what's up, Threather? Welcome in, welcome in. I for sure don't want action canceling silliness. I hate it in any game when it's part of your main DPS rotation. Agreed. Agreed. If it is a higher DPS gain to intentionally cancel an animation because you just need the first or the second hit out of the animation and the third one's not worth it, why the fuck is that ability even in the game? That just feels bad. Or you're only hitting an ability to give the buff that it offers, but it gives the buff when you activate the ability, but you don't actually want to use the entirety of the ability, so you animation cancel it and then go into something else. Like, that type of stuff is just annoyingly complicated. Like, I like big brain stuff when it comes to rotations and combat, but you're forcing, like, but that is essentially creating a system where I'm not utilizing the ability the way that you're intending it to be utilized. So if we as a community figure that out, then, or figure out something like that, then they need to come back through and rework that ability. I hope they won't make it too difficult. I agree, and I don't think combat needs to be overly difficult. Like, the actual player side, so the input side of combat, the player input side of combat doesn't need to be overly difficult. I think where you can add in more difficult aspects of combat is what the target is doing. That's where depth of difficulty in combat can have the most impact without it feeling bad. It was like, Hodor let me use the same shitty 6 abilities. I left League of Legends because of shit complicated after Plat 2-1. I don't want to be playing Twister to do... Okay, yeah. I see what you're saying there. Yeah, you can have in-depth combat without it being complicated. And like I said, I think putting more of the complication on the side of what you're attacking is a good way to implement more difficulty in combat without it actually affecting what I'm doing as a player. Outside of, like, you know, moving out of abilities, making sure I'm saving my block for the right time, saving my stun for the right time. You know, it's kind of like interrupt timing in World of Warcraft, right? Like, that adds to depth without punishing the player for them not having the best, hand-eye coordination or something like that. Hand, screen, eye coordination. Love the direction the game is going. For both melee weapons, shown doesn't really look fluid and a bit choppy, even through the animation. Slower than the... Even though the animation for the two-handed is slower than the daggers, it still doesn't really give a heavy feeling vibe of how choppy it's moving. I think that might just be... I think that's one of those things that through iterations and over time, that gets better, right? I think it's still good feedback to give. That way they know, okay, this is something that we need to make sure gets ironed out. But it's not something that like I'm overly concerned about. I think it's something that they're going to get to. Again, this is Alpha 2, a true alpha, true development, not, hey guys, look at my game. It's going early access on Steam. Pay $9.99 and you can play, this half-finished game. Like, this is true development. There's a place for a couple high APM classes, but not all of them need to be that way. Agreed. You have stuff. Rogue is a prime example, right? Something using those daggers that can be a high APM. Healers, depending on the type of healer, but healers are typically pretty low APM. Tanks, for me personally, I love when tanks have a higher APM. Steven kind of said clearly, game is going to be unfair and some classes going to be stronger against other ones. So if you want to kill your counter class, you're going to need full gear and decent outplay. Yeah, and that's where the player skill comes into play, right? Just because a rogue is supposed to beat a cleric, if that's the situation that it is, if a rogue is supposed to beat a cleric, doesn't mean every rogue is going to beat every cleric. That cleric could be god tier and just completely smoke that rogue. But that rogue, all things being equal, should beat that cleric. And that's gonna happen because he's not balancing, 1v1. It's balancing rock, paper, scissors, and not even just rock, paper, scissors, but rock, paper, scissors from a group perspective. And so there's going to be a ton of imbalancing when it comes to 1v1, and it's going to feel very imbalanced. The game isn't really going to be intended to be played solo. Really stoked for polearms and dual swords. Give me a cosmetic for polearm that looks like a scythe. I'll cream my Snor's panties. I will say that a scythe polearm would look absolutely amazing. That would be awesome. Getting better. Yep, another somebody else pointing out the sound as well. I do think that the sound was really good. Seraphita, initial thoughts. Combat seems to have picked a direction versus trying to support action and tab target, and is focusing on making that choice the best it can be. I think this is the right approach. Hold on. Okay, that's not true. That's not true. It's still hybrid. They have not picked the... Unless they're saying that the direction that they've picked is hybrid, but based on their parentheses there, versus trying to support action and tab target, it's going to be both. Just what we've seen so far is not that. Again, just another reason why Vaknar put that message out. BRB, I do think the graphics for the basic attacks are a little over the top. I think Rogue Healer is a type of thing like Lineage 2 Elf Daggers. Got self buff, self heals, and deals less damage, but very accurate hits. Okay. Yeah. And I think that could be interesting, right? Like, maybe that is a benefit, maybe that's a rogue augment. So if somebody is a cleric rogue, then, by having those rogue augments, maybe they're able to cast their abilities a little bit faster. Maybe there's like a speed augment that the rogues give. Watching dual daggers use a giant hammer skill. Yeah, we kind of went over that a little bit. I know Steven wants people to live out their fantasy within the game of how they want to play the game. But I really need to be convinced that that's the right choice. To me, it feels very weird. And again, we went over it earlier, but it would feel very weird to have a wand and a tome. Summoning the hammer makes sense because that could just be a spell ability. That one actually doesn't bother me that much. It was the whirlwind that threw me off. To have a wand and a tome and just start doing a whirlwind, that seems a little weird. Like, I don't know, like just because it's a fantasy that somebody has, do we really need to let them live that out? Like I don't know. Like I don't know. Yeah, PvP is gonna be a big indicator for that. Combat gives the appearance that it plays well, responsiveness, movement, weightedness, etc. But only time will tell when we get our hands. Okay, sure. I like the customization option being added into the game to help give the desire for add-ons. Agreed. To me, the combat looks a bit too fast. The daggers, for example, look like you will be pressing an attack every 300 milliseconds, and that will get tiresome when you're playing for long periods of time. It looks cool and flashy. I'm just gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna say agree. I think that that's a good point bringing that up for when you're doing that for a long period of time. But I mean, I've played Diablo 3 for fucking 20 hours straight. And there's a lot of button clicking in Diablo 3. A lot. And like if you're playing a whirlwind barb in Diablo, you're running around holding down the left mouse button and clicking all of your abilities like on fucking cooldown. I'm not saying it's good, it's amazing combat, but I'm just saying from like the tiresome side, I still would rather have high APM combat. I appreciate the update. Yada yada yada. Some of the animations looked a tad too cartoonish. I don't necessarily even think that cartoonish is bad. I just didn't like they fit. It just didn't look like they fit in with the rest of the game's aesthetic. That's another thing I'll kind of have in the back of my mind when we watch it again. Let's jump to the end here. All right. Jin Takame. First one I say I acknowledge some of the things I will point out in the feedback are under development and aren't finished and will improve over time. I love the stuff you are doing. I'm just a bit obsessed with details. Awesome. Let's break into it. Basic attack effects. That yellowish trail feels really unnecessary and okay, kind of went into that already a little bit. The way attack animations start and finish is a bit strange. I can agree you can kind of feel the weight of the sword, but it's just heavy at the beginning, then swings the sword with incredible speed. Animation stops immediately. I just think that the swing should be a bit slower than that. Okay, so again, another comment about the weightedness. Hammered in D3 was the worst for me, slamming the scroll wheel up and down. It's stutter, step, and cast. Yep. I hope we won't jump into a thing like I stun with hammer, use dagger stab, someone to death, but in lineage it was weird. Weapon where you can get lucky and get augment abilities. Magic crit and abilities, but these are rare. You just don't on hammer the next sec with dagger. Okay, yeah. Yeah, and I think we kind of already saw in Alpha 1 by the stats that were available that some sort of control like CC resist is going to be within the game. And so if it is something that you absolutely hate, you could potentially spec into it to where you kind of never get CC'd. Or you get CC'd once and then like you're on cooldown for getting CC'd again for like another 5 seconds, 10 seconds, however they end up doing it. Is there weapon swapping in combat? If we're going off of what we have seen, yes. As of right now, yes. They were doing a rework of the stats before Jeff Bard left, so I'm curious to know how they actually decided to make changes. Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, that's a good point. That all did happen before Jeffrey Bard left, so yeah. So more talk on the impact. Seems pretty similar to what other people have been saying. Should be a few second. I think people are kind of going for way too much of a realistic approach in a video game. Like again, I don't think it doesn't need to be so far from reality that it's ridiculous, but it doesn't have to be extremely real either. If you want real, true medieval style combat, there are games for that. But that combat does not work in large, successful MMORPGs because it is boring. A small niche of community of gamers like that type of stuff in their games. MMO players like combat needs to be good. Well, again, it needs to just not be shit. But combat is the vessel in which you are using to complete the tasks that are actually interesting in the game. The combat is not the focus of the game, in my opinion. Yeah, go play Chivalry if that's what you want to do. Exactly. Cleric going to have an ability. Yeah. I have 2 melee weapon slots, 1 range slot by default. I understand third attack is heavier attack with more damage output, but it's not a short sword that you can swing freely. Okay, again, just I think we're a little bit too much on the realistic side with like trying to make it too realistic with that. Personally, I prefer root motion because okay. So yeah, this person definitely wants the more actiony combat side of the hard, plant my feet, swing my giant sword. Which I get, and it's a preference thing. I understand that. I think it's really hard to do that in a system that is trying to balance between tab and action. So it's good feedback, but I think it is feedback looking at one end of the spectrum rather than the entire thing. And I know that Intrepid is very aware of that. So it is very important that basic attacks don't feel repetitive and boring like ones in traditional MMOs. Am I weird in thinking that no basic attacks should feel repetitive? Because they're basic attacks. Like they're the things that you're kind of weaving in between your rotation. You shouldn't just be only doing your basic attack. Like if it was like if your rotation was 90% basic attack, that would feel bad. But it's a basic attack. I feel like regardless of what you're gonna do, it's gonna be repetitive and boring. Yeah, like yeah, exactly. Baba, listen, should be filler for sure. Yeah, like again, like you're going to have an entire action bar of other stuff to press. Basic attack can be repetitive and boring. It can look good, it can feel good, but I mean, even if you have this super awesome meteor giant AOE thing, if that's your basic attack, inevitably that will feel repetitive and boring. So I think that that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to active basic attacks. Different animations with directional keys are one way to achieve this. You said you won't do full action combat, so I'm not sure if this is the way you choose because I don't know how fast or dynamic the combat will be, but that's one I prefer. As an example, you're attacking mobs while moving left or right at the same time, and the way the character attacks changes. I mean, that's what they kind of showcased in the video, right? Am I understanding that? Another way to move in combat other than dash roll. I put an attachment. I mean, I think they kind of did that. Yeah, I mean, you have different animations based on the direction that you're moving. That's something that Steven pointed out in there. Instead of putting one specific combo animation that players will do over and over again, there should be different attack patterns or directions, and the order of their appearance will be randomly generated, condition that they won't repeat. Okay, I'm going to push back on this a little bit because Gen Takame wants more weightedness, but then also wants the random order of appearance. Let's say the first two abilities are lighter, regardless of the type of weapon you're using, or faster. And the third one is heavier or slower. If that is randomly happening, that is going to absolutely fuck with your character. So I feel like this is a have your cake and eat it too situation. You're asking for something up here that I don't think is then also doable with what you're wanting here. Or at least it won't feel good. Feeling of a hit. All right, here we go. I swear to God, if they say that the sword needs to stop when they hit a rock. You think you want it, but you don't. You think you do, but you don't. This guy clearly doesn't have a phone. I think if the game lacks that feeling, it's probably about responsivity. Of course, sounds have a huge role in that, but also the thing you hit should respond. All right, I'll read through it. I'll hear it out, but this is probably the last one that I'm going to read about somebody saying the impact of your weapon hitting something, because I think people are trying to get too realistic with it. Unfortunately, even with 2022, the only MMOs that does this kind of thing is BDO, and since AoC aspires to be a unique MMO with many aspects, this one should be included in AoC too. Mobs, body parts must respond to attacks. It's quite presumptuous. Maybe something like a little tremble depending on the way they got hit, animation delay by stopping them for a split second, or since you guys really good at, you could do it with a completely different system that would make it more accurate, but I understand it would take many resources and the first ones to do it. If I see a mob tremble because of an auto attack, I'll yell at Steven. Yeah, no, I wanna hit the target and its arm fall off and it just continue to like swing at me. 'Tis but a flesh wound. Fetal position. You just poke it, poke the mob a little bit. It's like Ghostly Gardener. What I like. I'm liking the weapon trail effects. It's not super flamboyant, nor what flam. Is that the right word there? Or just a simple semi-transparent monocolored arc. There's some. I feel like a better word could have been used there. There's some variation, like like this is a situation where somebody just like throws a word in that's big just because it would sound good in the situation, or they think it would sound good in the sentence. Oh, I'm gonna put a big word here so it sounds really smart. With a simple semi-transparent monocolored arc. Hold on. I'm liking the weapon trail effects. It's not super flamboyant, nor just a simple semi-transparent monocolored arc. Oh no. And there is some variation between the different attacks as well, which is welcome. That guy likes big words. He's just better than us, all right? They're just better than us. That's what it comes down to. Us idiots down here in the mud. We're, you know, They're just on a completely different level than we are. The ground decals is such a great little touch and just adds to the immersion. Great job. The blending between upper and lower body as the attacks are being thrown out is well done, I think. Still requires some polish, but overall seems solid. Good take. The dagger sense of speed is great. The damage numbers are looking great, a lot better than I feel like most modern MMOs or even games in general. Yeah, they could have no customization in the numbers, and it's still good. It's still a good system. So it's nice that they're taking the extra step. The what they dislike, the X slash of the daggers. Very much personal opinion. I don't have anything against this sort of attack, but I do think it starts looking silly and childish when done all at the same time in a basic weapon attack. Would much rather see this sort of attack animation used for something higher impact, where you can put in more build up and heavier feel kind of attack in the middle of light one at the moment. I'm gonna say I don't care. I don't care if it's the third swing of the basic attack, and I don't care if it's not and instead is used with another one. I don't. To me, that doesn't matter. I don't care. Too floaty or lacking in impact. However you want to say it. Check suggestion wish list below. Suggestion. Holy shit. Hey, they go into some bow stuff on here, Baba. Hit stop. Briefly freezing the animation at the point of impact. I think Intrepid could be still a bit more brave with root motion and locking the player a little, especially with the... I agree to an extent. I think that they can add a little bit more, and they even suggested as much. The engineers were talking. I forget who was talking when it was said. And the quote that I want to go to from the live stream is where this was said. I think it can be a little bit heavier with the heavier weapons, but I don't think it needs to be much heavier. I think we're kind of at the upper side of the threshold. I don't know why he included muskets. Also, short bow and long bow were APOC specific. I checked the wiki the other day. No longer a mention of short and long bows. I mean, he's probably just using typical non-magic ranged weapons. I don't think it's necessarily in reference to what's going to be there. I'm not going to harp. I wouldn't harp on that detail, because these are very typical non-magic ranged weapons and medieval type setting fantasy MMORPGs. Mechanically different design. Hold on. Slowing down the basic attacks of daggers are pretty fine, but I wouldn't mind seeing both of these. Okay, so they're just going into the preference there. They would like the combat to be slowed down a little bit. I like the speed. I don't want the heavy weapons to be moving as fast as the daggers, and that's also not what we've seen. But again, to what somebody in chat had said, I think it's okay to have some abilities moving really fast, or some classes moving really fast and other ones moving slower. I think that's fine. Mechanically different design. I really want my weapon to feel different when I play with them, and not just in that they determine what skills I have access to. I want the fact that I am playing with one weapon over another to make me play different by just how the weapon attacks. As an example, because it is easy to make clear, physical ranged weapon. Short bow, shooting and reloading while moving. Longbow, shooting still and reloading while moving. Crossbow, shooting while moving and reloading while still. Musket, shooting and reloading while still. Okay, I mean, you could also go into short bow is going to have less range. Longbow has more range. Crossbow, you're going to have a higher fire rate, potentially. Or at least, I mean, if we're going historically accurate, it's kind of slower on all accounts until the crossbow actually progressed and was reiterated upon, but early iterations of crossbow were kind of dog shit. Crossbow was good for aim. That was the primary benefit of crossbow. The barrier to entry for a arrow projectile weapon was easier with a crossbow than with a short bow or long bow. Musket, I mean, yeah, musket. To go accurate with a musket, it needs to take a lot of time on the reload, and the accuracy needs to be dog shit. So, for all intents and purposes, the musket should suck in every game that it's in. Kind of skim through here a little bit. All right, well, we'll end that there. Let's go ahead. I'm gonna pull up the vidya. The vidya. Because I literally had a discussion with Vlad the other day about bows. All right.
Audio component, the UI, there's a lot that goes into making combat for an MMORPG. And to
So I'm skipping over it, but just to reiterate for people who have not heard it 3,000 times from Steven or anybody else at Intrepid, the development of this game is in true development, and it is open development. Everything we see is a work in progress. No matter how good you might think it looks, it is still going to be iterated upon 1,000 fucking times. This is early development. This is not final product. We are not expecting to see this game even within the next 2 years. It's basically what I skipped in the intro there.
Some scary things. So I'm just going to start kind of walking.
Yes. Yeah. I do remember that. But I think that the idea for the potion launcher, at least how Steven has talked about it in the past, is that there might be potion launching cannons on boats. But I don't know. We don't know if we're going to get a potion launcher personal like character weapon. Are you saying this is the finished product? What I will see on launch day? Yep, and launch day is tomorrow, Baba. I'm gonna need you to actually. It's not tomorrow, but it's soon. So just go ahead and hold your breath until it launches. Then I don't have to fucking listen to the fucking bullshit of opinion.
Walking down in this area, and
Love you, Baba.
Adam, Keenan, Trad, if you guys want to talk a little bit about how this process began all those months ago on defining
You can't launch now
for Ashes of Creation.
Sure. I would say, it starts with, all of the hundreds of thousands of hours, cumulative hours of MMO we have under our belt, right?
We have a lot of hours of MMO gameplay under our belts, collectively.
We just gotta push a couple buttons and we're immediately like, oh, it feels good or it doesn't feel good.
It's funny, Keenan, actually, you say that.
Yeah, he just quit school, Baba.
I'll know this because every one of you went through an interview with me. But one of the qualifying aspects of joining the team is, what type of MMOs do you like to play?
Nice. Yeah, so it starts there, and then from there we sort of do our research. We have to take a look at the state of the art, and then we
that building, like the mob coming to life animation, is so cool.
We study it. We form hypotheses about what exactly it is.
All right, right here. I didn't notice this the first time that I watched it. This is like my 4th or 5th time watching it now. But the red reticle underneath the mob indicates, to my knowledge, that we are currently in tab target. So for all of the people who are like, why did they go with action combat? The very first mob that he attacks, he is in tab target. We just don't have all of the UI information to confirm that. And it's also melee, and knowing that tab target is in effect while in melee is much harder to tell with range. For range, tab target needs to be done right. For melee, action combat needs to be done right. The vice versa for each of those cares very little about the other.
is that makes things feel good or not feel good.
So for the blocking mechanic, what I noticed is that at least with the greatsword, we haven't seen sword and board, but at least with the greatsword, it is not a full damage reduction down to 0. It is a reduced damage, which I think is cool and something that I want to try to pay attention to. I don't think he actually actively blocked with the daggers. He showed the block, but I don't think he actually blocked damage with it. So he's hit that hit there was 54. I think when he's blocking, he gets hit for like somewhere in the teens. So it's reduced damage, but it's not completely blocked. Blocked look ugly with the daggers. I thought it looked kind of cool. I mean, blocking with daggers is just idiotic in general, but I thought it was kind of cool that he like kind of put them together. You know what I mean? Blocking with daggers is throwing a smoke bomb and running the fuck away. That's how you block with daggers. Yo, what up, Grump? Oh, what up, Grump? Voice cracking over here. Sorry, going through puberty, guys. Is there going to be a stamina bar so you can only block so much, or just infinite block? I believe that there is going to be stamina, but we don't know 100%. Yep, what Baba said.
Good. And then we make those things in as controlled a manner as we can. And
see, right there, again, somebody talking about wanting impact for the mobs hitting you and whatnot with the bigger abilities. He literally just got launched away. That wasn't Steven using an ability. The mob pushed him away. Now, because it's first pass, an early iteration, he floated away.
We study it. We form
but
hypotheses about what
it's there.
Exactly it is that makes things feel good.
Oh, so he blocked for 27. Normal hit 54, blocked for 27.
In as controlled a manner as we can, and then we turn the knobs, we tweak things, we see what feels good, what doesn't feel good. We come up with some rules, some processes, and then we put them to the test. And this is what comes out.
Yeah, it's a very iterative process, right? Like, you know, none of these things are like you form your theory on paper and then you go and you make the thing and it comes out to be exactly what you see now, right? Like it starts out the first time not super great.
I don't know if he was just trying to show off the ability there, but Steven missed that ability like 3 too many times in this stream. Like, I did miss the start of it, but after I rewatched, this is a fighter War Master. Probably clicking it Weapon Master instead of using the keyboard.
And what we
probably
have to do as engineers and designers is identify what.
Like as an AoE person, when I saw that, I fucking creamed, dude. Like I love that. Which is funny because I know at least one person, that ability instantly turned them off to the game to the point where they're not even excited about the game anymore. Like, I saw that and I was just like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, that's awesome. Fuck AoE. Fuck you, Grumpy. AoE's amazing. Do you like Cleave? We might be middle ground here. Are you okay with Cleave? The wording that was used was spin to win. And in my head, yeah, I love Cleave. I don't like AoE to be every single fucking ability has this massive AoE. But I like having 1 or 2 abilities on certain classes that is insane AoE. Like, I think a mage should be able to drop a giant-ass meteor in one spot on the map and do a shit ton of damage to everything in that area. Because there's a sense of skill with AoE and doing it correctly. A lot of people don't utilize AoE correctly. A lot of people just go, oh, a lot of shit, let me pop my AoE. There's actually a way to utilize AoE in an intelligent way. When the meta is spam AoE in one spot, don't move equals win. Yeah, do not like that. Speak for yourself, I want explosions. Can imagine main will have some kind of meteor AoE, ranger with rain of arrows. Yeah, exactly. These are things that are staples in fantasy MMORPGs. They're just... yeah, they're just staples.
Great about those things, and then...
And I can agree with that, Grumpy.
And as long as you keep making it better each time, eventually you're going to end up with something good.
Yeah, and for this exercise and finding what makes ashes great specifically, we wanted to approach it from the ground up, answering individual questions about our hypotheses and what we think is good, right? So we really focused
So he's
on
blocking
individual
for-
aspects. That
he's
we
blocking in,
focused
like, the teens
on
there.
and answered them one at a time in a very tight iterative process. And we ended up at something that we think feels really, really good.
All right, I have a question for you guys. How much of the kind of little bit of lag that we're seeing is Steven being the one behind the wheels with his mouse controls versus the game needing to just, you know, be fleshed out and cleaner and smoother? Because sometimes it looks smooth and sometimes it looks choppy. And it's happening at times where, like, you can tell Steven is actively moving the camera. And it's something a lot of people have, right? Like, and you don't really notice it unless you're 100% Steven. And sometimes it's not even something that you really notice unless you're playing like a shooter, right? You see it a lot with people who have too high of a sensitivity on a shooter.
Into making the combat, but more importantly, the pacing of this kind of heavier weapon group.
Like, if I was critiquing Steven's gameplay, I would, one of the first things that I would tell him is that he needs to turn his sensitivity down.
Liked about MMOs traditionally in the past is that, excuse me, every portion of land is covered by some type of monster, right? And it kind of gives you this weird feel. But here, like, this is a very dangerous area that we're in, the environment. And part of it gets communicated by the, you know, aspect of these rocks and like the specific types of materials.
Yeah, it definitely needs polish, right? Like 100% it needs polish. But like where like the stagger gets really bad,
move up into an area,
I think it might be a little bit more of the user side of it.
The audio cue of the monsters like arising. Your
Yeah.
character gets into the combat stance. They have some
Not
really
even that, but all the
cool
detail that
aspects
you
of,
see off in the distance as well.
The animation team did an
great.
amazing job with the rolls here. I'm loving, and also they're like just like swinging away and then flying off. That is so great.
Yeah, I really like the camp feel of this area where, you know, you don't just see these guys scattered around all over the world. No matter where you go, there's like something that's going to aggro you. It's more like, I'm going to grind here for a bit.
Yeah, it's definitely not normally my thing in a game,
You were talking about how you like
but
how heavy
I think
sword
that
feels,
I
and
will give it more of a
that
chance
weight
in this game than I have in
is
other
one
games.
of the combat pillars that we have been studying and honing in on in our development process. The other side of it,
I agree, Threather, but I also think that that is something that... Oh, this is actually a good pause right here. You can see the blur. The peripheral blur effect happening. That was a really good happenstance of a pause right there. I agree. I think it would be really cool to have the dynamic spawning of the mobs, and maybe we will have it. But it's not so important to me that I would want them to waste, like I wouldn't want that to push back the development time. I feel like the motion blur is
the other
very
side of it
subtle.
being, also like agency, you know, to what extent does this
But
one respect your
regardless, I'd
intentions?
like to
And
be able to
that's
turn
the
it
part
off.
That's important to me. I'm a classic player. I come from traditional MMOs, right? Like I want to be able to move and attack at the same time.
Right. Yes, and that was a huge point of feedback actually that we received during
Yeah, roaming
Alpha
mobs
1.
will be cool.
Was that we started with this more root motion approach to the basic weapon attacks, and ultimately we called an audible mid-test. I remember it was in that end of July or beginning of August month where we decided to implement a completely split body approach and get player feedback. And of course, the feedback was very positive, resoundingly positive, right?
I agree.
Players
I agree,
prefer
Thriller.
that agency.
It's subtle,
over that,
but it's still getting
weightedness, but
turned
they
off if I have the
also-
option.
There's a little bit of a conflict there because they also didn't like the floaty feeling, which comes along with not having the weighted approach. So how did that play into your guys' defining this current approach on the weapon attacks? How did you blend those two?
Yeah, so we kind of approached it from looking at player agency primarily, as Keenan had said, and the games that really handled player agency the best are those like classic MMOs, right? Players really like how smooth the classic MMO feel, how much player agency they get
Miss.
out of it, and then we took that and we tried building this sort of impact and weight on top of it, really making attacks feel satisfying, making it feel like the inertia of the weapon and your movements are accurate, physically accurate. And we accomplished that through a number of ways. Really, again, talking about the process, we tried identifying each individual aspect of what.
Oh, the notifications didn't go through. Toxic Ape, thank you for the follow. Chocoletta, thank you for the follow. Thank you guys for coming in. 4 minutes ago, Chocoletta and Toxic almost an hour ago. Appreciate it. Thank you.
We got out of these, more modern action games, and tried incorporating that into our classic MMO base. I think it all comes down to looking at it not as a binary of, are we doing split body or are we doing root motion combat? It's looking at everything as modular pieces and then dialing in those numbers to make something that feels high in player agency, feels very impactful, like it has a lot of inertia, it feels very physical.
So even this right here, watch how Steven moves the camera. He's got some, like, I don't think it's the game. I think it's how Steven is moving, and he has a lot of stutter when he moves.
High in player agency, feels very impactful, like
See, it's kind of like
has a lot of inertia, it feels very physical.
Yeah.
All right, we need to see if he blocks with the daggers, and if it is the same amount of damage reduction as with the greatsword, or less. And if he does block with the dagger, I hope it's less.
My litmus test for agency in combat is take any moment in combat, pause time, look down at your hands, look at the keyboard, the buttons that you're pressing.
If you are looking at your keyboard or your ability action bar while you are in combat, that is something that I would highly encourage any gamer to work on not doing. Your eyes should be center screen, and hopefully you're not playing on a giant ass fucking monitor, but your eyes should be center screen, using your peripherals to take in all of the other information. Your eyes should not be focused on the bottom. Getting better at that will improve your gameplay and allow you to start getting better on a whole nother level. Do not be staring at your keyboard. Do not be staring at your action bar. If you find yourself doing that, make an effort to work out of that habit. That is something that will vastly improve your gameplay. You should know where your abilities are. Once you've played a little bit, you should have a good idea of when stuff is coming off cooldown to where you're not having to stare at your ability bar. You're staring at your keyboard. There's some issues there, but just as a general tip for somebody who is rated at a very high level, if you're staring at your bar, you're taking away. If you find yourself constantly getting hit by shit you should be avoiding, pay attention to where your eyes are while you're playing the game. If they're on the action bar and not your character, that will help you become a better gamer.
Should be the directions that your character is moving. So with these weapons, even though there are little bits of root motion here or there, they're always respecting your WASD input, and I think that's what makes them feel good.
I think another thing that you guys did that helps with that is the timing of which that gets registered, right? Like, it's not, at one iteration we had it where it detected what your input was at the beginning of the attack, and that just felt like if I decided to change my mind and go left instead of right in the middle of that attack.
I think he has, There may or may not be something happening on my YouTube channel at this exact moment. Hi, YouTube. And I'll go into that as I'm wrapping up the stream. There's a potential to be switching over to YouTube eventually because I don't like the shit that Twitch is doing. So, but I talked about it at the beginning of the stream, and I'll go into it at the end of the stream as well.
It's too bad it already kind of queued that, and so I think now what you guys are doing is having it happen at like swing time, right?
Yep, it's constantly looking at your input and adjusting.
Now I've equipped these daggers, this dual wielding, these dual daggers. Talk to me a little bit about the differences between the heavier weapon group and the light weapon group.
All right, right here. This was the greatest statement, in my opinion, of the entire live stream. Because what it told me is that Intrepid has a vision for what combat is going to be. They're willing to hear feedback, but they are not going to go against what their vision is just to appease the masses.
Yeah, so initially in our investigation, we wanted to start with the light weapons to figure out how to really blend the weight of an attack and introduce, or start with player agency and then introduce.
It's actually a little
that
bit
weight
after
of the
this, but this
attack
is the
into
start of it.
We figured the least risky weapon to start with would be the lightest weapon possible. You know, little daggers that move very fast, very high player agency, and not necessarily focused.
I think it is a singular weapon. I think dual dagger. Like, I don't think you are necessarily going to see somebody running around with like a dagger and a tome, or a dagger and a one-handed sword. Maybe you will. Like, maybe you will. But from my understanding, dual dagger is a weapon classification, just as the two-handed greatsword. So I think dual dagger is a weapon classification, meaning that it's considered one weapon.
Big weight, much like a heavy sword. So we started with that and tried introducing little bits and pieces here and there, like small bits of root motion to get that nice like dashy feel in when you're attacking, and play into that inertia. I know Keenan might want to talk more about the animation timing sheets we introduced for figuring out these timings that feel good.
Yeah, that's part of our process for communicating cross-department, is using frame timing diagrams and being specific about how we not only want to animate, but also how we want to move during different frames of the animation. And we found that to be very successful. But one of the things that makes the daggers different than the sword is that the daggers never really slow you down. They're both respecting your directions, but the swords will actually slow you down at certain times. Like leading up into the strike, your split body movement is sort of blending down towards 0, and then you strike, and then it blends back up toward to 1. The daggers are not doing any blending like that. You're just split body, and then you're striking, and then you're back into split body. It's like a seamless process.
Yeah, I'm just playing with the directionals here. I mean, on the animation team, they did a phenomenal job. I'm loving the kind of foot placement and movement, the strafing feeling on the body there. I know Alexi did a lot of work on the IK as well, that we can see like when you're, kind of stepping up different portions. It feels really good to play.
Oh yeah, considering how physically based we are and animation driven our combat system is, it was super important that the animators, get all of that right, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. I mean, one of the biggest things I think to making good feeling attacks is getting all of the departments involved in what feels good and on the same page, right? Getting everyone iterating. So, like in the process, we started with chopping up animations to build an ability that we thought felt good. And then we wanted to pass that off to animation to finalize those animations by chopping up our abilities and making animations that feel good. And then we can all loop everyone back together and finalize that ability. VFX has the same process too. So, it's a bunch of different departments iterating on a very micro scale to build something that is just awesome.
Yeah, the animation team definitely had to take a deep breath when we went to them like, hey, You know those 3-part weapon combos that we like so much? We want different ones for each direction that you can move in. Oh, and also you need to be able to weave between the directionals at any time.
That is pretty funny. One of the things that's interesting and is always a point of contention for those of us who have perhaps played different games and have become accustomed to specific visual representation of these damage floating text.
That's
right?
what I'm trying to pay
And I
attention
want to
to.
showcase a little bit. I'm going to let them hit on me for a little bit just so you can kind of see directionally damage you take, which is indicated in this red number, floats towards your left-hand side. And when you do damage to a target, they float to your right-hand side.
Yeah, so I agree. And like you said, Threather, or Steven, you can make it to the boat. The first 2 swings with a great sword look and feel good. I'm gonna say look good because I'm not able to play it, but look good. But that third one definitely does happen kind of fast, and so they might need to slow that down. And so my mind is exactly where yours is, Threather. It wasn't something that I noticed before, but since when we were going through the community responses to stuff on the forums, I definitely notice it now, and it definitely does seem fast. What? Was that a mistype, Toxic?
Now, one of the very important aspects of these floating texts is providing
Need to
the
be
player
slow.
with
Recovery is what I think the
customization
slower part
options
comes
that they
from.
can
Well,
adjust
I
the
think
size
even
of
with
the
that being the
floating
case,
text,
I
they
think
can
it still
adjust
happens
the
a little bit
color
fast.
composition on how these texts are represented. They can also include damage icons to indicate the ability that's used for those floating text. And importantly, excuse me, we also call out the crits that you do in a separate way, how they pop in. They're slightly above those, the other numbers. And then more so, we also have additional functionality for cumulative damage values. So I'm going to kind of go through that. You'll see here as I press, different option. Now we've changed the colors. Whoops, hold on. Let me see. Make sure. Is that color going off differently, or do I not have my... Hold on.
Still yellow.
Is it? Okay, let me try this.
Like that knockback, that obviously needs to be iterated upon, right? Like just kind of floating back like that doesn't look
Maybe
right.
that's not. Hold on, let me find a different
But I
monster.
feel like that's
I hope that's working. If it's not, we can
clear.
show that a little later. Let me press this button. Oh, here we go. Okay, so you see the color is changing now, and that's...
So okay, but there's a little bit of wind up to it. I don't know. Like, I think the actual swing animate, like I like the wind up. Maybe if they don't want to mess with the timing, like the overall timing too much, maybe remove some of the delay from the wind up and put that delay in the swing. Like, just kind of shift where the impact is happening. And I think it might kind of balance out a little bit. Yeah.
something that the player has agency over, right? You can assign different types.
Personally, I think I would rather be knocked back than down, because down comes with a stun, but being knocked back, I can pop an ability and close that gap right away. So like if I have a charge, I can essentially cancel that knockback by charging back to the target. At least that's how it's been done in other games. So now it would feel bad if you don't have that gap closer off cooldown, but being like hit down usually comes with a stun. Hey, what's up, Onsington? The daggers are gonna have to smack to make up for the range difference. Methinks, got Jar Jar Binks over here. Misa thinks, but maybe they think the faster movement during attack makes up for it. Well, I mean, yeah, that's always the mindset with melee, right? And especially with something like Rogue, it's a lot of attacks. Like if they can get to you, you're fucked. So the range has the advantage at the start, but if they can get to you and they can get a CC off on you, like, that's when that damage really comes in. Yeah, I think all ability or all classes should have some kind of movement ability. I don't think that they all need to be to the same level or impact, meaning the Mage Blink could be like the longest gap closer. And maybe Rogue just has like a little dash forward. But I think all classes should have some kind of quick movement ability. And then the range at which they move can vary between classes.
Types of colors that you want. That was changing. I think the one I was pressing actually was changing the size. So let me try to change that size again. There you go. You can see that size now is larger. You can showcase XP if you want. You can bolden the numbers a little bit as well. But
I don't know. I think I'm going to walk back what I said about it needing to be slowed down. Now that I didn't notice it before, but now that I'm looking at it and I'm watching a little bit more closely, I kind of don't care. I think it's fine. I think if you want to nitpick it, sure, the swing could slow down a little bit, but overall, I don't think I care.
Providing kind of maximum flexibility and character customization.
Oh, I'm gonna no. I was already planning on pulling up the 2017 combat video.
Excuse me, player customization options.
Individual
for these
numbers.
Text I think is super important, but I love the way that they feel that kind of classic, very almost.
Wait, did you just at yourself?
What were we saying, Keenan? Very vanilla vibe.
Oh yeah, sometimes the best flavor is just vanilla.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree.
It's actually my favorite flavor
Yeah,
of
but
ice
your team's
cream
done
is
a great
vanilla.
job on the functionality for that. I
French
think
vanilla
it's
ice
pretty
cream.
good. Yeah, that's very cool. So, where are we now when it comes to kind of the spectrum of light to heavy attack options on these basic weapon attacks? What's kind of next for this as we showcase it to the
Oh, but it showed it as me.
players?
Well, I think we've sort of defined our spectrum with the light and the heavy.
Oh yeah, so on the before they go into this, I know I'm pausing a lot here, but I'm talking with you guys. We're kind of going through all this together. One of the concerns that I have is if somebody develops a screen reader add-on. So basically it's just watching everything all on the screen. And basically I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer. I don't know how realistic this is, but in my fucking dumb brain, this seems possible. Somebody can create an add-on that is essentially watching your screen, and anytime it sees a certain color of a number, it calculates it into a damage taken, which then can be calculated over time, per attack, all of that different stuff. And then attacks being in a different color, how much you're doing, how much damage you're doing, or how much healing you're doing. So I feel like you may not have an add-on in-game that's as responsive as Details, for example, in World of Warcraft, but that there is still some potential for that because of the color customization side of it. Maybe not. Maybe that's just a ridiculous statement. I don't know. But it seems plausible. And from what I've learned from the internet, there's a will, there's a way. And I mean, I said this years ago, just because they're not allowing DPS meters in their game based off of the add-on, they're not going to be able to have add-ons that are reading in like API information, doesn't mean there are not going to be add-ons. Star Wars The Old Republic didn't allow add-ons. People still developed damage meters, star parse, like that was a thing back in the day. Like, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with all of that. They can say that we're not going to allow damage meters, but can they actually prevent that? I don't know. We'll see.
When it comes to agency versus weight versus impact, when you look at the heavy, I think we're close to saying that this is sort of the most we want to compromise.
And then this is my sorry, I'm gonna back it up here and then I'll let it go after I finish this. Um, this is my thing when it comes to there not being damage meters in the game. If the community is going to find a way to calculate that information anyways, why not just have it? I know what they're trying to avoid, but all they're doing is raising the barrier to entry by making it be a third-party DPS meter rather than an in-game DPS meter. They're raising the barrier to entry for people to know what it is that they're doing because the high-end people are going to use it. The portion of the community that you're trying to prevent from being assholes to everybody is still going to find a way to utilize that information. What they're actually doing is all of these people up here are basically going to be saying, go download this, have this thing. Whereas if it's just already readily available in the game, at least everybody has access to it, equal access to it. Because I think it's going to happen either way. They don't want to become the ones to foster the type of that type of society. I get that, but to me, that's kind of like the argument of we want to live in this dystopian future where everything is perfect and clean and awesome. I'm more based in reality. So, but the problem is once that becomes standard for the top 5%, it is going to become standard lower and lower and lower. And I think it will actually end up being even more toxic because then people are going to be like, well, I'm not going to download that. I mean, look at voice comms over the years. Hey, go download Ventrilo. No, fuck that. I'm not going to, I don't want to do voice comm stuff. I mean, if you guys remember back in the day, getting people into voice comms was actually a chore. And in some cases, it still is nowadays because people don't want to utilize that stuff. Now it has become normalized. Almost fucking everybody in their mother has a Discord, right? Because it's become normalized over time. But early on, even just getting people to get into voice comms, that was considered not like a majority of the gaming population didn't want to do that. And eventually it becomes normal from the top because the top tier people were using voice comms. Eventually it trickles down into the lower tiers. And so having it readily available, I think is a good thing. Kill proof shit, like Guild Wars 2 is cancer, would rather have a DPS meter be standard. Here's my thing. If the community had zero access in creating their own DPS meter, then fine. Don't let them be in the game. But I think it's going to happen. To be honest, I think include people will find a way is a terrible mentality to include something that fosters a toxic environment. Again, I know where you're coming from. And I'm not saying this to say that I've been around gamers more than you have, because you're a gamer. I know you've been around a lot of different types of gamers. I think that I'm more taking the world as it is rather than, I guess, how I would want it to be. I don't want there to be this toxic mentality that comes with damage meters and Raider IO score and gear score and all of this different stuff. But my concern is by trying to prevent it, are they just kind of washing their hands of it and saying, well, if you decide to use that third-party thing, that's not our problem, that's your problem? But the reality is the community dictates what the meta is, not just in game, but by what kind of add-ons are being used. I mean, you see that in WoW, where add-ons are run rampant. There's still a meta for add-ons that you use. Looks for dislike button. I don't like that stuff. I really don't. I like it on a personal side because I like being able to look at my own numbers and improve my gameplay. But I don't like it for the toxic environment that it breeds. To be clear, I don't like it, and that's why I'm okay with them saying, hey, no DPS meters. But my concern is that enough? And if it's not enough, then why are we trying to prevent it at all? So, and maybe they'll come. Yeah, exactly. Maybe they'll come through and they'll have some kind of, I don't want to say anti-cheat, but some kind of, system that's basically determining whether or not the screen is being looked at, whether or not a third-party add-on is being used. And if it is, you get banned. Okay. At least at that point, they're doing something about it not being allowed in the game rather than just saying, well, we're not going to give it to you. If their standpoint is, well, we're not going to give it to you because we don't want to be the ones fostering that environment, but you can still use it from these third-party companies, why even fucking bother? Now, if they're taking steps to prevent it overall, then I 100% agree with what you guys are saying, because they're actively trying to get to that less toxic environment. But by saying not our problem, it's not going to be in the game, that's the only step that we're taking. That's like saying, hey, don't cheat in our game, but by not banning people for cheating, their words mean nothing. We can't stop people from using it. We will implement a DPS meter. Nothing wrong with being wrong. I respect them trying. Sure. No, that's fair. I won't touch it if it's bannable. Same here. I will not risk my account for a DPS meter. I just won't. Maybe my second or third account. but I won't risk my main account for something like that. All right. Enough from DPS meters. I want to get to what they're saying here.
Yeah, that's very cool. So, where are we now when it comes to kind of the spectrum of light to heavy attack options on these basic weapon attacks? What's kind of next for this as we showcase it to the players?
Well, I think we've sort of defined our spectrum with the light and the heavy when it comes to agency versus weight versus impact. When you look at the heavy, I think we're close to saying that this is sort of the most we want to compromise agency for weight and impact. And once we have that upper bound, we can sort of play with all of the different intermediate points, right, as we start to build out other weapons.
That right there was the greatest fucking thing they said in the entire stream. What that told me is that they have this range that they're looking at. We have our vision for combat. We appreciate your feedback. We want your feedback. Continue to give your feedback. But we do have bounds in which we are working in to ensure that the vision of the combat in the game is what we want. Massive. Play it back. I was thinking to myself. All right, one sec.
Versus weight versus impact.
What's kind of next for this as we showcase it to the players?
Well, I think we've sort of defined our spectrum with the light and the heavy when it comes to agency versus weight versus impact. When you look at the heavy, I think we're close to saying that this is sort of the most we want to compromise agency for weight and impact. And once we have that,
the most that they want to compromise, I'm putting words in their mouth, the most that they want to compromise based off of their vision of what the game is going to be and what the combat is going to be, based on feedback, right? Based on what people want. That's how I interpret that, and to me that's fucking massive. Because if that is applied in combat, I would like to assume that's being applied in other aspects of the game as well.
Upper bound, we can sort of play with all of the different intermediate points, right, as we start to build out other weapons. But we have interesting explorations as well in how all of this translates into ranged and also ultimates. We might take the limiters off for ultimates and just see what the coolest things we can make are.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty interesting. Another component, by the way, of
yeah, I call that as misses. I should call it as hits.
Weapon attacks is also the visual effects side, and weapon trailings, the intensity of those weapon trailings, how they scale based on the type of weapon, the level of weapon that you have, but not just the trailing on the weapon per se, but also the ground decals. Like for this heavy weapon, that first strike, you see that kind of that decal.
All right, I'm gonna slow this down here. So There's the obvious rubble coming off the ground, but I want you guys to pay really close attention. Oh, not quality. Really close attention to the small rubble that comes off on the ground. The detail is so good.
In the ground is, I love that look. And even on the backswing, like when I hit,
We need to see it from the side. It's harder to see it from the top.
it's causing that decal.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff
Yeah, a lot of that.
gets down into the really low-level systems details. Like, we want to pass the artists as much information as we can about actual combat ongoings so that they can inform the effects as precisely as they can, or as precisely as they need to.
Do I need to go back? Do it again,
Actual
Steven.
combat ongoings. Really low-level systems details. Like, we want to pass the artists as much information as we can
In the ground, and weapon trailings, the intensity of those weapon trailings, how they scale based on the type of weapon, the level of weapon that you have, but not just the trailing on the weapon per se, but also the ground decals. Like, for this heavy weapon, that
Shit!
first strike, you see that decal in the ground is, I love that look. And even on the backswing,
So the
like
little,
when
it's still
hit
hard to see,
the
but
ground,
the way that it like breaks away at the crack, the detail on it is hilarious. Drunk update. Yeah, the backswing coming up. Yeah, you can see it right here too.
behind me.
Yeah, just like the way that the ground cracks and breaks apart, like it's the detail on it is crazy.
Causing that decal.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff gets down into the really low-level systems details. Like, we want to pass the artists as much information as we can about actual combat ongoings so that they can inform the effects as precisely as they can, or as precisely as they need to, rather.
Yeah, and we really wanted to build on a technical side. We really wanted to build the combat system to, like I said earlier, be as physical as possible. So we have it very animation driven. Everything is handled based on a reference of animation as opposed to like
Same, Baba.
nebulous timings, right?
We'll have
Which
the
allows it to
5090 by
feel
then.
very impactful and very responsive. So when you hit the ground,
Yep,
the
Grumpy's
ground
got it.
decal actually appears on the ground when it should. You know, that's something that may not be seen in other MMOs. So we really
Hold on. I think this is it right here.
wanted to make a big
Like some of the rocks go flying, some of them are really close. It's like kind of rumbling right there. Looks great. Absolutely fantastic.
focus on that and focus on the responsiveness.
Yep. One thing I failed to mention, by the way, apologize for that, is actually
2 to 3 years,
you
Baba.
guys are
2 to 3
seeing
years.
the Pyre male for the first time in game. I know we've showed him on the stream before, as these character races get further fleshed out, but here you're seeing him in full flesh and blood, so to speak, virtual flesh and blood, I guess, in the game. And that's pretty cool to see. I can't wait for players to kind of get a look at the customization options in the character creator for this race. Also, another thing that's really important, I think, is the audio component. And Kat has done a phenomenal job in both the sound design for creatures as well as for the weapon. And actually, you guys haven't seen anything yet because we have a lot in store on that front that I think is going to be pretty cool. And it's all part of the presentation, right? It's all part of what makes combat feel good, is also the auditory component in that. Talk to me a little bit about the capabilities that the audio team has when it comes to accessing combat and the abilities.
Yeah, similar to VFX, we plan on piping in a lot of information. That's something we've been working a lot on recently, is tooling for VFX and sound effects, right? It's a super important part, as you said, of the package in order to sell that weight and that immersion in the game. And there's going to be a lot coming online, so I'm really excited to see what we have in store for.
Just
for
launch
that.
A2,
So, yeah.
Steven.
I
Just
don't
do
know if
it.
we'll ever show it on stream, but
What
we're
could possibly go
building
wrong?
A sort of
Flashbacks to
singular tool that
APOC.
all of the teams can use to build abilities and tweak them. Sound effects, visual effects, animation, design, engineering, all using the same tool, grounded in animation, to build these abilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Another component, Adam, which you guys worked on is camera controls and adding. Talk to me a little bit about the kind of visuals that are provided through these additional camera controls for abilities and combat.
Yeah, so I mean,
At some point, I don't know, I don't remember when it happens in the stream, but Steven said something along the lines of equal opportunity sliders, referring to boob sliders and crotch sliders. Like,
the word of the day has been impact and weight, right? And a lot of that is sold through what the player sees. We didn't want anything to be nauseating or over the top, and certainly people can adjust it in option settings, but we wanted something that would sell a lot of the weight without being too over the top and too sort of cartoonish, right? And so we implemented a few different camera effects, things like camera shake,
hey,
radio blur,
Psycho!
a few other,
Thanks for the
involved,
resub, man.
and
Appreciate it.
really tried to maximize our bang for the buck with those to sell the weight of these attacks. And
3 months. I think you got a beard upgrade. I think Psycho got a beard upgrade.
really adds a lot, especially I've noticed a lot of how your peripheral interprets the way that they attack really sells it for me as a player. So that's something we've been focusing on, and it's made huge improvements to the feeling of these attacks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeez.
I love it. So, looking forward, as we continue to flesh out both the medium melee weapons, and we'll be showcasing our ranged weapons in combat in a future stream, we're also going to be talking a little bit about and showcasing, which you guys got a little sneak peek on a few abilities, some class kits and the ability systems as a whole, and what we're able to accomplish for Alpha 2. Of course, we promised at the beginning of this year that you guys would be getting some pretty exciting showcases of all the work that's being done on the project towards Alpha 2. You got that with the character creator, you got that with the seasons and weather systems. Now you're starting to get a little bit of touch on the combat side. And I know that there's a lot of stuff that design has been prepping.
I think that when they showcase range abilities, it's going to be their way of also more heavily showcasing tab target because of the response that they've been getting, and a lot of people thinking that this is like an action only thing. I think they're going to use the range as an opportunity to really showcase tab. And I think that that would be a smart call by them.
Around the work that's been done on these class kits and the different archetypes that are going to be playable across Alpha 2, but there's a lot in the store, and there's a lot of functionality that the engineering team has provided our designers when it comes to both the functionality of certain types of abilities as well as the synergies possible between them. You want to talk a little bit, Adam, Keenan, and Trad, about what's possible given our ability toolkit?
Definitely.
Man.
I mean, so this whole, prototype process has been kind of, 2 steps. One of those steps was what, Adam and Keenan were talking about a bit there with, their hypotheses on, what makes good feeling combat, and they've done a great job on that. But the other side of that was also just, coming up with these almost mock class kits. And, the idea was this might not be the
Yeah.
final class, but
True,
there will
Bubba. Baba.
things that we can take from it that we like, and then get rid of that we don't like, and let's just make something. And you guys
But at
have
least
seen,
both will be
some
showcased
sneak
at that
peeks of
point. You know what I
already
mean?
from the Assassin and previous stream, and now you're seeing something from the Weapon Master. That was the other one that we took just to,
I mean, technically, we're seeing Tab right now.
and contrast these different types of combat. And
No, I
what I
don't.
was kind of going for here was,
What it allows me is if somebody were to come in a chat and be like, "Oh, this is Tab target. This is stupid." It allows me to have information to go, "No, you're fucking stupid. Exhibit A." It's not preventing people from being stupid. It's allowing the people calling the other people stupid evidence as to why they're stupid. That's all that it does. Yeah, I talk to my chat that way. You're all stupid. If you disagree with me, you're dumb. It's as easy as that. Wait, what is this? This isn't Baba Yaga's stream. No, get out of here, Baba.
getting class synergies in place where, maybe, for example, you've got a thing that if you kill someone with one of your other abilities, it'll reset the cooldown on one of these abilities. And there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on in this kit, whereas there
You got me by 1 point, Baba. I apologize. I bow down to you.
wasn't so much of that interaction in the kits in the previous alpha. It was an area that we felt.
I actually have no idea what my
And
IQ
the
is.
good thing about that whole exercise that we did is we came up with a lot of cool abilities. You're not seeing them all here, but they, what it really did for us is it developed our tools, because we realized, oh, we can't do this.
Yeah,
or
it's
we can't
huge,
do
Psycho.
that.
It's huge.
And so, like, the designers and Adam and Keenan here would kind of go back and forth and say, like, designers need to be able to do this particular thing that we can't currently do, and then they would take that and they would make it possible in the tools. So we're really putting our best foot forward here. That way we are going into like the full class design. We're going to have a lot of stuff that we need to hit the ground running.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Keenan.
I do as well, Threather. And the reason why I like it so much is they're talking about how all of the other sections of development are utilizing the same tools. I mentioned it last night on Golden Feather. One of the best things about this development team at Intrepid and their vision and how they're going about it is they're building a baseline that is very plug and play. They're doing this literally from the ground up. And when you do that, you avoid shit like spaghetti code that you get in WoW. And it's being applied across the board. Exactly. And it's something that we saw with the character creator as well. The character creator that we are going to use as the player, they are also going to be using, and are probably currently using, to create mobs within the game. So they're taking a tool that they are using themselves and giving it to the player, but it's such a good baseline for it that they're creating a tool, the character creator, for the player to use, but it's such a good baseline that they're able to use it themselves as well. And when you're creating something that has multiple purposes to it, it's usually a little bit better. Because if they created a character creator just for the community and they use something completely different themselves, what they have would probably be better than what we had access to. But because we're using the same thing, granted, they'll probably still have more functionality to it than we have, but we have a ton of functionality to it. I don't know how much more they're going to have over us, and that's awesome. But yeah, the way that they're implementing systems and whatnot, they're doing such a good job at the baseline that it's just making all of this other stuff come together so much easier. I always refer to it as plug and play.
I was just gonna sort of build on Trad's point, like all of these exercises, or throughout all of these exercises, we're very careful on the ability system side to
Tap
make
target.
sure that when we're adding something new, we make it as modular as possible. We really want to think of these abilities as being made out of like Lego pieces, not being sort of like molded from a single block of clay. So whenever we are trying something and we build something new, that's a new piece that we have to explore and combine with all of the other pieces that we've already made.
Plug and play.
Absolutely. The other thing that's
Fucking
important,
smart.
is important probably for players to understand with regards to Alpha 2 is that this is another testing ground, right? Alpha 2 is a test, and in Alpha 2, we're going to represent components of the class kits and the ability system that may not make it to launch, but it is a perfect area for us to kind of get both player feedback as well as for us to log data around its usage, its impact, its feasibility as essentially a component of our class kits, right? We're going to be experimenting a lot with regards to that for Alpha 2. So it's very exciting.
Oh, definitely. We're just getting started.
Yes, absolutely. Well, guys, this has been a fun stream. I think I really enjoy obviously talking about this stuff and showcasing the hard work that you guys are doing, everybody on the team is doing across everyone that makes combat a fun and tactile thing for us to play with. There's a lot that goes into it, but I think the team is hitting it out of the park with these showcases as we show, essentially what our quality bar is for Ashes of Creation. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching. Please make sure, it's very important that you guys give feedback with regards to kind of what you saw today. It is always something that we are iterating upon, but generally based on what feedback we already received out of Alpha 1 and the pursuits that our engineering side as well as our design side have been examining and playing around with, we feel really confident in this approach for the basic weapon melee attacks. But we want to hear your guys' feedback, what you thought of today, so make sure to comment both in the YouTube section as well as on stream, on our forums, on our Discord, Connect Everywhere. We value your feedback very much. It is an important part of creating All
right. This is February 8th, 2017. I'll get you guys pulled back up here. Seems like 20 positions left on their LinkedIn. Multiple spots left. Yeah, I think there are multiple spots for some of the positions. The biggest con out of seeing this, so my biggest con going into it was I thought that we might be further out than we expected because they're piecemealing the combat update and they're wanting feedback on each part of it. Seeing that, after seeing what we saw, that concern was curbed a little bit to the point where I actually think we're going to be seeing it a little bit faster. What is my biggest concern? That's a good question. I mean, it's kind of my concern throughout all of the development in general, but seeing these early iterations of it, and I've said this before, but seeing early iterations of it, one of my biggest concerns is how the community responds to it. I don't think that they should be scared of it, but I do think it is something that they should be aware of. And I know that Steven is, that's why stuff looks pretty polished by the time we end up seeing it, because we didn't see all the iterations moving up to that point, right? So he is keeping some stuff behind closed doors. It's not truly 100% open, but it is more open than we've seen other stuff. So, and we've seen it just by some of the, community response that we were going through earlier in the stream, that there's a lot of smooth brains out there. And unfortunately, people are going to look at it, make the knee-jerk reaction of what they think that it is, and that's the end of it. Now, the reality is if it launches and it's a great game and a bunch of people are playing, all of those smooth brain people are going to continue to sheep themselves wherever the big streamers are, and they're going to play whatever they're playing. And if they're having, then they'll end up having fun with it. So I'm not worried about it long term, but I am worried about kind of the negative response to stuff. But overall, I think it has been a positive response. So I don't think I have a huge overarching concern in addition to what my concerns were before this most recent update. I'm ready for more testing. I feel the world is getting knocked out, honestly. So, probably joke. Like the video. Didn't even like the video. Oh, on their YouTube. Whatever. Moved the game the most. Honestly, I don't have a concern about the video and what was shown in the video. Yeah, I think I'm in the same spot. I had to think about it a little bit, but I think I think I'm in the same spot with it there. So this is the 2017 Dungeon pre-alpha footage. Just as a comparison to what we just watched. And to be clear, this was fucking awesome in 2017. Like, it's still cool. Yeah. I played this mobile game. Look at the character animation here, guys. Look at this character animation. It looks so bad compared to what it is now. Like, I'm not trying to not trying to shit on what they did then, because then it was fucking awesome. And this is like pre fucking pre-alpha, right? Like, even for the time. But oh my gosh, it is so much crazy. It's so better now. The character looks so bad. Like, there's no face. You see eyes, maybe a little bit of a distinction for a nose, and that's it. I still want to see this monster in the game. I still want to see that monster in the game. Is that the Balrog? Yep. Yeah, that's nuts. I was going to go over that, but we kind of already read. I didn't realize that we actually went over what Vislox has said, so we'll skip that. Oh yeah, when they, because don't they have their own composer for it and everything? I forget the dude's name, but like they have their own they're gonna have their own score for the game, like specific to the game. Yeah, the bear guy. Yep, Bear McCreary. That's right. All right, so I'm gonna wrap up the stream here a little bit, but hang out. I'm gonna kind of talk about this Twitch/YouTube thing that I kind of have in my mind here a little bit and kind of bounce it off of you guys. And then we'll raid over to somebody. So I have been debating. I've been playing around with the idea of switching the stream platform over to YouTube. The main reason why is because, not that it overly impacts me. I'm a small streamer. It's not like I have, hundreds of subs or anything like that. For two reasons. They're talking about an adjustment to where it's going to be more of a 70-30 split. Amazon gets 70, the streamer gets 30, rather than 50-50. And that's, first of all, fucked. That's less of the concern. Where this thought initially came up, that might be the straw on the camel's back, but where the thought initially came up, switch over to this, where the thought initially came up was they're changing, when they changed how they are doing ads on the site. As somebody who watches Twitch, not frequently, but when I do, I fucking hate it when ads are constantly popping up. Thanks, Baba. And Twitch has been leaning into that more and more, and I'm not a fan of that. And I don't want, whether or not you guys are okay with it, where my mind is with it is, I personally don't want to put you guys in a position where, in trying to support me, you are also supporting something that I personally myself would not want to support. Does that make sense? So it's less about how you guys actively feel about it, and it's more about, I don't want you guys to have to, by way of supporting me, also supporting something that I think is total bullshit. So I'm very much considering a switch over to YouTube. It's going to be a drop in viewership. It's going to be, a drop in exposure for a little bit, but I am a very principled person. And based on those principles, again, I reiterate, I don't want to force you guys to support something that I personally myself would not want to support. That goes for sponsorships in the future, if that ever becomes a thing. I will never sponsor something on any type of channel, social media, anything like that, that I don't fully support myself. I don't care how much money it'll make me. That's just not who I am. I will only put stuff up that I would want to support myself, whether that be sponsors, whether that be the platform that I'm on. That being said, I'm not an overly huge fan of the way that YouTube handles stuff, but there is less of an impact on you guys, because supporting me on YouTube literally just comes down to subscribing to my YouTube and watching when I'm live. Whereas on Twitch, there's an underlying expectation that you guys subscribe. Not from me, but that the way that the Twitch community has developed itself is that to support the creator that you are watching, you subscribe to them. And that is a monetary cost. And so picking your poison here, picking the poison, YouTube might be the better path. I'm still mulling around with it. I'm still thinking about it. You do you. We'll support however I can, wherever you choose to be, and I appreciate that, and I really do feel that. I feel like the people that are wanting to support me in what I'm doing would carry over to YouTube, even if that's less people. But I mean, you guys have seen me stream to one person, to two people, all the way up to 20s to 30. I mean, tonight we peaked up into the 20s, which was awesome. I'm kind of cheating a little bit, because streaming in the Ashes category is just an easy way to get people to come in. But just kind of like a little bit of an explanation to that, and kind of where my mind is with it. And just to kind of let you guys know what the reasoning is behind it. But like I said, it's less about whether you guys care what Twitch are doing or not. This is purely on my side. So regardless of where I land with it, I appreciate you guys hanging out, not gonna get all fucking sappy with it, but I appreciate you guys coming in, hanging out, talking, chatting. I mean, that's literally the number one thing that I love about streaming. It reminds me of the days of taking the Xbox over to the friend's house and doing the LAN parties. So love gaming, talking about different stuff, and having other people to talk to while I'm doing it. So I wasn't aware until you said something. Oh yeah, about the ad stuff and whatnot. Yeah. Sappy blows kissy noises. Fuck out of here, banned. You forgot one thing, Baba. You forgot the Mountain Dew Livewire. And an ad pops up in the middle. Yep. And that's what initially brought the thought on. And so it's less about the subscriber thing. Because if I move if I move over to YouTube, it's actually going to be less money on my side. So if I cared about the money, even though Twitch would be taking more of it, there would still be a way to earn money. That's not why I'm doing it. I do it because I enjoy it. That's why I've been streaming for 10 years off and on. Roughly 10 years. I just enjoy doing it. I've always enjoyed doing it. It's never purely going to be about the money. I will let you guys know. Let's say I blow the fuck up and I'm getting to a point where I'm done streaming. I will fucking let you guys know when I am cashing out. You will see a huge downturn in the type of content that I'm putting out. But yeah, so that's all of that. But let's see who is live right now before I scare off too many people. Do you guys ever look at your Twitch follower and not know who the fuck you're following? Like who somebody is? Cash out, cash out. Yep, Raid Shadow Legends incoming. Yep. Not Fane because he never streams. I was about to make that joke. All right, we are going to raid over to Murgalok. So, long time World of Warcraft content creator, generally just all around good dude. So, make sure you show him some love when you guys get over there. Again, I appreciate y'all hanging out and chilling. And I'll be live tomorrow, 7 p.m. Central, Friday through Monday, 7 p.m. Central. And we'll see what we get into tomorrow. Baba, I can tell you right now, it's probably not going to be Ash's content, so don't worry about showing up. But I appreciate you being here tonight, man. All right, guys. Have a good night. Ash is tomorrow. Ash is the next. Have a good night, guys. See ya.